So this concept has come that we have to engage at scale. I'm actually going to make a case for why true engagement, not just pushing messages out, which of course we all know that the trust in institutions and the messages that they give out is continuing to plummet. That by and large, we tend to trust people like ourselves. That's one of the biggest lessons that we've learned, and social media has really made that possible because now we can talk to everyone out there. We actually can get all that information. Amazon had that big realization. They said, you know what, we're going to put ratings and reviews on all of our products, and you guys can find out what they're really like for the very first time, right, in scale, right? So that was one of the first great examples of engagement at scale and applying that. And we've learned that social is the ideal platform for engagement at scale. And one of I think the really compelling things is we look at all of the really fast growth online services, and they're all fundamentally social, right? Like the story of YouTube. 12 people and $10 million. 18 months later, they had more viewers than all of cable and network TV combined. With this little tiny investment, they disrupted that $600 billion spend, right? So those are the types of outcomes that we're looking for. We're all not going to create YouTubes, but we want to create the same type of engagement, be connected with the world. YouTube doesn't have any product of their own other than what their customers create for them. It's astonishing. They've been able to engage and get value. In fact, that's what we see about social is you get more value from it if you do it right than you have to give out to your customers. That's what's astonishing. And we'll make cases for that over and over again. That the most powerful resource that you have, period, is the marketplace. And the network is where all the value is. And it's about our ability to tap into it. So how do we do that? Because our companies are small, and the world is very big. And we can tap into them with social and make that happen. So we know the numbers. It's always really scary. 175 million LinkedIn users. If you're a business, it's very likely that you might be engaging first with LinkedIn rather than Facebook. There's 400 million tweets a day. This number continues to go up, although we try and put good sources in here for this. Facebook just crossed 1 billion users. Value on a massive scale, if we can figure out how to tap into it. And we see, and the examples are in the book. I tried to put in there, and if you've been reading my series on ZDNet about high-impact social business, you know that companies are using to drive major sales results, drive customer retention, improve customer care, do crisis resolution. The story of Toyota in the brake crisis a couple of years ago. Here's one of the most storied brands around, the most trusted, most appreciated automobile brand. They literally self-destructed by not engaging in social media. There was a firestorm of all of these millions of car owners who were talking about it, and Toyota was missing. They were failing to engage, and their brand, and we have the chart in the book, and their brand value plummeted below all others. And only was until Toyota's North American vice president got out there in the social media personally and started talking to people honestly with his own voice about what was really going on that you began to see them recover. They never totally recovered from that hit because they did not understand the engagement process. They do now, apparently. So, we scale, data, and a truly two-way interactive medium creates an opportunity for insight that we haven't had before, right? So our customers and our potential customers can be aware of our brand. They can then learn to really appreciate us and learn to think about us and then advocate for us, right? So this is a virtuous cycle that we see over and over again. That today, when customers really engage and like a brand, they want to be part of it. And they want to own it, right? They feel a sense of ownership. So I did a project for the CEO of the Gucci Group, the world's largest luxury brands group. And his biggest concern is that the millennials, people under 30, generally don't go into the stores, right? People over 30, that's where they engage with the brand. People under 30, they want to do it online. And by the way, their average e-commerce basket is something like $4,500, average. I find that astonishing, right? So that's where the business is, but they literally want to take ownership of it. They want to say what are in the different fashion lines every year, what the products should look like. If they like Gucci, they want to be connected to it in an integral way. And I asked them, we were doing a TV show for the whole company. And I said, do you see that that in a few years you'd have a line of fashion where you let any starving fashion designer submit designs, and your customers pick the ones that they like. And he said, not only do I think that's possible, and he pointed to all of his designers, he says, I expect it. So we see business leaders really looking at that, and we see now high fashion brands doing that all the time. Coach has done crowdsourced designs like that. There's Threadless. There's actually a long series of case studies and examples in luxury goods of having done this, saying that we actually have to connect deeply with our customers, not just transmit the marketing and sales messages, but actually involve them in the way that we run our business, because they are our business. That's what's so interesting about all this. But what we're doing now is primarily shouting at our customers. And that has limited ability to engage. It doesn't. If we look at the brands that are really successful out there, the Amazons, where again everyone's really deeply connected to the brand, the Apples, right? Everyone, if you own an Apple product, you live with it all day long, right? Deeply, and you're touching it all the time, and you're buying stuff and buying apps and media and truly engaging with it. And so that's what we have to do. And so today's engagement platforms, that includes things like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, of course, but there are over 400 social networks with over 1 million users, and many of them have a lot more than 1 million. They have tens of millions of users. For your individual business, you have to find out where those engagement platforms are, because they promise to help your small team, no matter how big a company you are, by the way, you've got a small social team. Although we're starting to see the really big firms. I was talking to the CIO of Time Warner. He's got 300 social media representatives. Now he's got tens of thousands of traditional representatives. So we still see these small teams have to figure out how to go into these engagement platforms, go to all of those channels, because channel fragmentation is the issue here. So not only do you have all those social networks and all the online communities that are relevant to your business, but you may also be creating your own. Because the real challenge with a lot of these engagement platforms is you don't own them and you don't control them. So you've got, as we talk about in our strategy development, you have a major fork in the road when you start down this path, saying, am I going to let other companies own where I engage with my customers, or am I going to build my own? Building your own can be hard, though. But long term, it lets you call the shots. But I digress. So they're inadequate. The way that we have our current engagement strategies put together with only a handful of resources and an audience of millions, the ability for our companies to have a meaningful impact is pretty limited, right? So this is the imbalance problem that we have, because we started seeing things like this a few years ago. Gatorade and Red Bull and a bunch of other big consumer brands primarily began to create these big NASA-like command centers for social media. So they would go in there and they'd build out a whole room and they'd staff it with people 24 hours a day and have graphs about who's talking about what and when, right? So they have these heat maps up here, and it's really exciting, right? So some companies are out there going, well, we've got to get out there ahead and engage, right? But you can only staff up so big, right? So I think the average staff of a large company social media command center is 11 people. And you just can't staff into capitalizing on engagement at scale. It's just not going to work. You can spend 0.3 seconds per week to engage with each customer that wants to talk to you. Is that going to work? No. That's not going to work. We have to think about some other way of doing it. That's our real challenge. And so for years now, we've dealt with this. Social media marketing has been around meaningfully for about 6 or 7 years, depending on who you're talking about. Although there's a few people doing it before then, and we'll talk about them. But we do see around the broad edges a new approach emerging to engage at scale and mobilize our constituents. And the first set of resources we do have, and you should absolutely use, is your employees. Right? You're organizing systematically your employees to engage in the marketplace. So I'll break this down in more detail as we go through this session later on. But it's not just your 11 social media staff members. It's everyone in the organization. They're not going to do it full time, right? But they're all subject matter experts in their own way, right? They're all stakeholders of some part of your business, and they have the information that your customers want. More importantly, you do have extra bandwidth, right? We do have a cognitive surplus in our organizations. So step one of engaging at scale is going to be organizing our employees to engage with the marketplace and managing that somehow, ensuring that it's happening. And you have to give them tools and you have to give them training. A great example we'll look at is Dell. They have a social media certification program. It's 3 courses with an optional elective. And once you go through it, you get your certificate. And you're not allowed to engage in social media until you have it. But once you know the policies and procedures and what's expected of you, then you can. And we'll look at how companies are organizing to do this in some more detail. So we are going to get very in-depth in this session. Your partners as well. And what's more exciting about using your partners, right? And these are all your suppliers, everyone who is an external stakeholder to your business. Guess what? You can rope them in too. And you don't have to pay for them. That's even better. They're a free and scalable resource, and collectively they probably outnumber all the resources that you have. And they have a vested interest in helping out, by the way. So we have this issue of how do you engage with millions of customers? Well, first of all, you need to get everyone in your organization who should be involved. Not 100% of your organization should be, but a lot more than you probably have now should be involved. Then you've got all your suppliers and business partners that you work with. They should be involved too. It's a little more difficult. You have to do a lot more education with them, right? Because you don't directly control them, really. You have to get them excited and motivated to do that. But it's another great pool of resources. But all of this is a good pool, but it's advocates. People have already traveled through that whole process. They've learned about your company, they've come to love what you do, and then now they have information about how that product or what services that you have are so great, and they're willing and can be enlisted to help in scale, right? So activating your advocates, and that is the largest resource, and it's also the most passionate resource, believe it or not. We'll look at some of that. So we can bring all of these people, if we can, all of these individuals coordinated around our messages, around our ideas, and not in a cynical way, right? Literally, social media allows us to form a partnership with the world in a way we never could before. We used to have to kind of do everything ourselves. That doesn't make any sense. And by the way, it's too hard and expensive. That's $600 billion a year we spend to do it is because we're trying to do it all ourselves. And we don't have to do that anymore in the era of social media. And it's not a question we don't have to, we shouldn't. And soon we can't because our competitors will be doing this as well. And quite simply, they can do a lot better with a lot less by using models for engaging at scale like this. So we see that advocates are just better marketers than us. Why? Because they're more authentic. They make the YouTube video showing your product and reviewing it on Amazon or doing whatever it is to tell the world how great, what an incredible experience they had with that. That just has a lot more truth to it. And this is the genius of of user ratings and reviews, for example, from the very beginning. Is that the companies that did that get the first shot at the business, right? So people go and read the best ratings and reviews for a product, and that company has the first shot at selling to them. We have to adapt that model to whatever it is we do as organizations. So the data seems to be there. This is some of the newest information I can come up with, March 26, 2012. The effect of social engagement according to senior execs in North America, right? Of course, what they say, improved marketing and sales effectiveness, far and away the most valuable use of social media. Increased market share, though, is a close second. Improved product and service quality because we actually learn what your customers like and don't like and what problems you have because you're actually, for the first time, listening in scale. Improved brand of stock value, and so on, right? Surprisingly, decreased costs here because I think we're still learning how to do this. Right now, we're pouring too many resources into doing this all of ourselves. That's the way we've always run our businesses, right? We have to do everything ourselves. And that means we have to resource it, staff it, and do everything. So this probably shouldn't be the case, even though some are reporting decreased cost. In fact, some of the best case studies we'll look at here today will talk about decreased cost as a major value. But we're not seeing that yet. That's the laggard right now. So The message here is we need to turn our customers, employees, and our partners into the advocates that we've always wanted to have, as opposed to we always advocated for ourselves. Right? That's been the traditional strategy for many years. So how do we do this? We need a framework. And if you've read my stuff online, you know my frameworks look a lot more complicated than this, but we want to break it down so it's quite basic. We want to identify those advocates. Then we want to somehow activate and engage. Where, we're the cheerleaders, the curators, if you will, of the best advocates, and talk to them, right? And have a plan for getting them to help. And then we have to measure the performance. This is the part where I see a lot of organizations are not good at systematically measuring. There's no feedback loop to say, all right, we did X, Y, and Z in these 2 steps. How did we do, and how can we improve that? And to reflect that in a continuous feedback loop until you're getting the results that you're looking for. All right, so let's look at some case studies, some newer, some older, because I think the old ones, the older successful stories show that this is sustainable. But there's been some new and very exciting examples of companies engaging in scale and getting serious results for it. So one of my very favorite stories is the one of Burberry. I get really excited when these stories, by the way, work in non-technology companies, because technology companies have been using social media, which is a technology. They're really good at applying it to their business. So we've seen Nokia and Intel and all of these companies, SAP, as we're going to look at in a moment. They have been doing this 5, 6 years ago and getting good results. But most of our companies are not in high technology. We want to see this happening in regular businesses. And the Burberry example, which happened last year, is a great one. So Angela Ahrendts, their CEO, their new CEO, she came into the business in 2010, and she found a mess. She found a successful global brand, but one that was highly disorganized on the inside. And that's her talking with Mark Benioff on stage. I actually took this picture. I was right there. And that's her famous napkin of the mess she had inside of her business. Information couldn't get from where it was to where it needed to be. So the customers didn't know when new products were coming out. The suppliers didn't know what was expected of them. They had 6,600 workers, 10 million Facebook fans. So they were loved, right? They had the brand awareness and the love. What they didn't have was the engagement. And they had 15,000 partners. And they weren't talking. And it was a problem. And they were rudderless in the marketplace, not growing. So she came in and said, we've got to change. So what are the options? What do we have? And she heard about this thing called social business. And every CEO has been reading about that in Harvard Business Review and the MIT Management Review. And said, all right, well, we're going to do this. We're going to tear down all the barriers in that giant mess. We're going to connect everyone together. They threw away their website, right? Completed a completely new, fundamentally social website that allowed them to actually talk to the world. And they plugged everyone into it, right? And did this with a lot of Salesforce products. And they did it very quickly. This was their only major corporate strategy in 2011. And what was interesting is that it worked. So when someone was trying to figure out what was going on, they could actually talk to the person who was responsible. And when people ask questions, the people with the information can see it and answer the question. They fundamentally reinvented their business around engagement. Now, the story is still not done. This will take them years to finish this. But they put a lot of major pieces in place, including the customer engagement component. And in the Q4 2011, Wall Street analysts credited their social media strategy with a 21% increase to the bottom line. Now, if you do the research, you see they're having problems with a downturn in China and things like that. But they kicked butt last year with their social business strategy by redesigning the organization around engagement. Now, I like it because here you have a big company, thousands of people, who, when they have the right leadership and say, we're going to engage socially, and that is going to be the organizing principle, and then able to do it relatively quickly. Got a lot done last year, such that they were able to show these results. So that's a great story. I like that one. It shows that it's possible, and it's a respected company. One of my very favorite examples, and we have this in a little bit more detail in the book, is the story of Intuit. Now, I know that they're a technology company, but they're financial services, right? They help us do our taxes. And they had I think one of the most instructive stories on engagement at scale that I have yet seen. So Their challenge was, a few years back, was that H&R Block was the #1 tax preparer in the country. And you'd take your shoebox full of your tax papers, you'd go down, you'd pay your $450, and they would do your taxes for you. And Intuit's proposition was, yeah, you don't have to do that. If you go and use our software, because we're not using people are expensive. If you use our software, we'll prepare your taxes for, maybe 5 to 10 times less. So it's an attractive proposition. But there's no people involved on their side, right? So what would happen is, taxes are complicated, right? Our tax code is 200,000 pages long. Someone gets deep into their 1040 and there's a fork in the road. And they don't know which one to take. And if they can't figure it out, they want to call Intuit, right? You want to call customer support. Or you want to get online and send them an email. Now the problem is Intuit's not a small company. They do upwards of 50 to 80 million tax returns. And everyone is doing them all right before April 15th, by the way, right? So there's this hard deadline where tens of millions of people are using the product. When they try and contact Intuit, what do you think happens? Busy signal, right? Nothing happens. In fact, they can't, because as soon as they hire enough people, and they would have had to hire tens of thousands of customer service representatives, in this very elastic fashion, and staff them in all these buildings around the country to answer these questions. And they wouldn't be able to provide the service at the same cost, which was their value proposition. We're 5 to 10 times cheaper than our competition. So for years, because of this problem, they had a lot of product abandonment, and they weren't able to, they were distant #2 in the tax preparation market. So I like this example because they tried everything. They racked their brains trying to solve this problem because it was holding them back, right? H&R Block was cleaning their clock in terms of market leadership, but they wanted to be #1. So eventually they settled on customer forums, right? So they put a tab on the product, and you click on help, and you could post a question and hope that somebody would answer. But do you think that had a dramatic impact? No. I mean, they tried to use social features in the product, and the customers had to know it was there. They had to sit there and write a long-form question, and they had to wait for an answer. It provided like a 5% improvement. It did not revolutionize the process. So this is the solution they ultimately settled on, something called Live Community. And they did a few special things, optimizing their product for engagement. And what they did was they put on every single screen of their product the Live Community page. And you could ask a question. So you didn't have to go looking for it, right? It was there in front of you every single time. You've probably used it, in fact. And at any point in your tax preparation process, you could ask a question. And Intuit can answer it, or, and what was far more likely, other customers can answer it. So here's an example. How do you calculate cost basis, says Fletch 13. Obviously, try to figure out something to help him prepare his taxes. And someone else comes in, TurboTax Vincent, and says cost basis is generally the dollar amount required to, and so on and so forth. I want to answer the question, because they would see it pop right up. So how does this work? This is their big question, and the question I often get is, yeah, but how do you know that question is right? You're letting somebody come in off the street and support your customers. We'll get into the motivation in a minute, but it did work, and when they had to spend a lot of time optimizing it to make sure that the answers were as good as they could be. So they put ratings down here, and they also have a send thanks. Here, 2 people sent thanks for this one. This has been viewed by 131 other people as well. So by putting on every page, they made it contextual. They also made it extremely easy, removed all barriers to participation, all barriers to engagement is how we look at it. And they were able to trigger engagement at scale, which is what our message here is like, this is how you solve the problem. So when they first launched it, 80%, right away, 80% of the answers came from their customers. Again, enlisting all of these resources they didn't even have to pay for. And then they put in architectural mechanisms, right? We call these architectures of participation, to ensure that the right answers were filtered so that the customer saw the best ones, and the bad ones, people could flag things, got out of the way. If someone flagged it, immediately went into a queue for review, right? But it doesn't matter, because usually any question got multiple answers. But why would people do this, right? Well, this is what they wanted to understand, because now it's close to 90% of all customer support across all their products is now done through Live Community. And you can imagine, you see the value they're getting from engagement at scale, right? Saying, you can't do it all yourselves, you shouldn't, right? And I had to beg them, let me tell the story in the book. Because it's highly competitive. TurboTax Vincent, he has correctly answered 13,861 questions. Why would he do that? He's got 36,000 points for doing that. You can see his recently answered questions. Well, the clue lies in his profile here about TurboTax Vincent. He's in his 6th year in the tax preparation industry. So when they did the research, they found that what he did is, hey, the biggest pool of people who want tax help is in, that he can access anyway, is in live community. And he can advertise how good he is. Look how many points he's gotten. If he can answer 13,000 questions, he must know a lot about taxes. If you're trying to do tax planning, he might be a good person to talk to. And you can view his profile and actually talk to him, right? Evidently, he finds it useful enough to generate business. It's his form of advertising. So he goes in there, an hour a day maybe? I don't actually know. They actually talked to him to try to understand why this was. There's also retired people. Guess what? There are retired people who love solving challenging tax problems, right? And they get in there and do it for fun. They've created a whole profile of people so that they could appeal to them to ensure that there is things in there that would reward them for doing this, which is what they want. So this is what we call social business by design, right? Trying to design these solutions so that everybody gets what they want, right? So TurboTax Vincent is willing to help, right, in ways that are valuable to him, but is also extremely valuable to the company. The year after they released Live Community in this optimized form, right, on every page, optimizing for engagement at scale with the right filters in, they dethroned H&R Block. They have been for years now the leading tax preparation company. They still aren't able to answer everyone's questions, but instead of having dismal customer satisfaction because they couldn't answer any questions, they're actually able to create a product that people like to use and they can get help with. So this is a great example about what cut their customer care costs by 30%, which is a big number in most companies. Another good one. This is a regular business. I do mostly work with large companies, but this is a nice medium-sized firm who's able to get some good results. This is a recent story here. Robertson Durkee, Florida-based law firm, product liability, construction defects, commercial and insurance litigation. They started way back in 2001 with us with the China drywall problem, right? It happened back in 2001, but the walls were toxic, made out of toxic materials. Very, very big problem. We had, and this is a quote directly from Durkee himself, managing partner, we have a very specific, very educated group of people who are going through the biggest crisis of their lives, all with the same needs, all needing the same information, and I needed to be able to get that information out to the public very quickly. So they employed a surprisingly sophisticated multi-channel social media outreach program. I don't see small companies, they usually have part-time people doing all of this, right? But they were big believers in social media, and they discovered that by putting information out there in blog format so people could come in and ask questions and talk to them, they could talk to a lot of people and provide answers, and that gave them the search engine optimization as well, so the whole rest of the world showed up after that, right? Because you type that same question into Google, their pages came up. You come in, they would join the conversation. It led to, very quickly to over 100 major new cases in a short time. To this day, this is a new quote from Mr. Durkee, you get about half their business that way by just talking to the potential customers out there in public, right? Everyone can see it, but those discussions are visible to everyone, and it draws everyone else in, right? And this is the virtuous cycle of engagement that we see. People see you're willing to, hey, I could talk to a lawyer on a blog and get information, and that information turns out to sit around for years, continuing to draw in people and educate others, enlarging the conversation and driving business discussions. Half of the new cases. Just have to engage a little, have to be willing to talk. And they get their employees, they dispatch it. We're going to talk about the dispatching process. So I'm going to kind of formally break this down a little bit for you as we go through the session here. We'll wrap up the examples here, although I'll try and sprinkle more examples in through the rest of this talk. SAP, tech company I know, but it's a great B2B story as well. They have been doing this longer than just about any other company. But again, like Intuit, out of sheer desperation. So as their products began to get more sophisticated, By the way, technology products never get simpler, at least on the inside, right? They always get more complicated, right? It's an additive process. We keep adding features and capabilities. As their products became more complicated, they had a hard time convincing their customers that they would work for their business or even what they did in many cases. So what they created was the SAP Community Network. And what they would do is they invite their customers in, and they told their employees, and this is the great engagement at scale story. The exact quote was, for the vision was, it's going to be 90% us at first and 10% them, because we need to all show up. If you work for this company, you need to be in the community and talking to customers, answering their questions. That was the seed that really kicked it off. And that's really important. Starting the engagement cycle is hard, and it requires getting as many people on deck as you possibly can. And their vision was smart, and they got buy-in across the company to do it. 90% of us at first, 10% them, and if we do that, it'll be 10% us, 90% them, because there'll be a there in that community. People will get answers to their questions. But they also saw, at first, they thought this was the way to do customer-employee interaction, but actually found that their customers were helping each other, like Intuit found, more than they were helping their customers. Because somebody in a given industry might have already used their product to solve a problem, and then someone else could come in who had in that very same esoteric business. SAP is not an expert in that industry, and can say, well, here's how we use the product, and it is working for us. So very quickly, they began to see results from this, and they expanded it. At first, it was just for developers, and then they expanded it to marketing and pre-sales. This is a whole halo here over the years, three major phases. It is now the world's largest social network for B2B services, 2.1 million active users, not registered. Those are people active in the last 90 days. And growing. I haven't got the new numbers from Mark Yolton, who runs the SAP Community Network. But it is a runaway success. It is strategic to their business for closing sales, for driving marketing. And guess who does most of the work? Because SAP is a large company, but they don't have 2.1 million employees. Or do they? Right? This is the question. These things cause the boundaries of our organization to blur, in mostly a good way, not always a good way, as we've seen a few examples. But engaging at scale works, and this is a great example. 8 years they've been doing this now, and they've expanded it across all of their businesses. They have great presentations on SlideShare talking about how they do it, how they're organizing it, how they recognize champions and high performers. Because if someone goes in there and does a lot of work, they realize, just like TurboTax Vincent, there better be something in it for them, right? And that's, again, part of your social business design process. So here's one of our typical designs that we've done, just so you know what they look like, for doing something like the Intuit or the SAP inside a large company on a global scale, right? There's a lot of thinking that goes into it, but it's pretty well understood now. By the way, this deck is available. You're welcome to take all the ideas right off of this page here. But this shows the whole virtuous cycle, which I'll break down for you. And this is the kind of clarity, the kind of education that you need to do, because I guess the hardest part of this whole thing is going to be changing your thinking, right? Because the market's ready for this. We see this happening now repeatedly. You look at companies like Get Satisfaction, who do this, provide this off the shelf for major brands all the time, saying, yeah, we know you don't know how to do this, so we'll just give it to you as a package service, so you can sign up for that. For a lot of medium-sized companies, that's perfect. You can get most of this done already for you, all the software and all the processes built in. You just got to supply the people and the mindset willing to open up like this and blur the boundaries of your organization to engage at scale. All right, so I think that was a good frame up. I tried to give you some of the Kool-Aid, right, and then try to show you hard-hitting examples. The book has about 94 other examples like this, and in every type of industry. We only see one of the most regulated industries out there are having a problem doing it, but even they're doing it now, right? So financial services, healthcare, insurance, those are the problematic ones. Government too. But I've been working with the intelligence community. I'm based out of Washington, D.C. for years. The President's Daily Briefing, I advised that project. They use social media to curate that now, right? So everyone internally inside the CIA says, all right, we got 2,600 intelligence sources today, but the president can only absorb 10. So how are we going to get that number down to 10? What are the best ones? How do we do that? They all do that using social media, right? They kind of do the same process inside here. If they can do it, we can do it. So what are the type of gains possible when you actually do this? We see 4 broad buckets: increased productivity, revenue creation, the benefits related to connected culture, and cost reduction, which, by the way, was really exciting during the downturn. Well, some of us are still in the downturn. But these are the things you got to show your boss to let you do this, saying that, hey, there's benefits to do it. We're not doing it because it's trendy, although it's important that you seem to be a part of the modern world. But we see 30% faster customer care processes, 18% higher customer satisfaction, 15% increase in successful innovations and ideas. By the way, your customers will tell you what they like and don't like. You can just tap right into that. We see 10 to 50% reduction in communications costs. Whether this data is from McKinsey, our research in the Social Business Council, which is our community. We've done this too. So we've created a community of people who are doing large global social business transformations at their company. It has to be the person in charge of it. The 300 companies out of the Global 2000 that help us figure this out. What are they seeing, right? We just released our new Engagement at Scale report. I encourage you to look at that. Easy to find online. But we've learned a really important thing about engagement at scale. So McKinsey & Company, the very respected management consultancy, has been doing something really great the last 5 years. Every year, they gather thousands of companies together and go, all right, social technology, how's it going? And they've been asking inside, outside, in the supply chain, how is it going? And they've been breaking the data down. And they've been seeing sustained benefits, just like the SAP story. SAP is seeing more value every year, right? And they're seeing that too. Although when you average it all out, it's incremental improvements. So they're tracking 2,400 companies. This is their most recent one. Their 2012 report is not out yet, so this is the very latest data. 2,400 companies, global firms, who are in the developing stage. They're just getting into this. They're sprinkling social media around the edges of what they do, not like into it, deeply into how the process itself works fundamentally. And they're seeing 1 to 2% incremental gains. If you do something only a little bit, you're only going to get to see some results. By the way, that's a big, for a global company, if you're a $100 billion company, that's $1 billion, right? So these are not small numbers we're talking about here. That'll pay for your social business strategy, by the way. But 224 companies have successfully completed becoming internally socially networked. And they're seeing, of course, internal benefits, 18%. That's big. That's in line with what we're seeing across all the data, Frost & Sullivan, AIM, IBM, all those studies. So that's pretty encouraging. Now, most companies are still on the left though. They're developing. But a couple hundred have successfully networked internally. A few more, 365, have externally socially networked, and they're seeing benefits, right? Nice, good double-digit benefits. And again, you're not going to see probably that whole 13 or 11% across the entire business, but those numbers will pay for what you're doing. But they found this pattern for the first time last year. A few companies finally have come out of the end of the process, and they have fully socially networked inside and outside. Because does it really make sense that you're socially engaging with your customers, but your employees have no social tools? No. Obviously, you're going to have challenges. And they're talking about companies that have done this broadly. Right? Like we've seen firms like IBM. Traditional legacy communication tools are deprecated, meaning that they're discouraged from use. You only use them if you have to talk to a customer or something. They don't want you to use email. They want you to use social tools. That's a 500,000 person company. They're not fully networked on the outside yet, but anyway, for the 100 firms that they've identified that have gone through the entire process, that are true social businesses, not 100%, no company is 100% doing this. But the ones that have largely done it see these results that are outsized, right? They're not additive, right? They're holistic. There's a lot of value in becoming a company where what you do is you fundamentally engage. It's like the Burberry example we were talking about. And the data, this is a large picture of the entire world doing this. Most of us are over here. But the ones that are doing this, and Frost & Sullivan had another interesting thing. They looked at public companies, and they put together the same list. Is this company fundamentally social, or is this one, are they just starting, or where are they? And there's a strong correlation with profit and revenue increases in companies that are on the right. It's independent of the McKinsey data. So that's a great story. Again, these are numbers that you can walk through because the hardest part is getting permission to do this a lot of the time. and saying there is a strong case. The evidence, we didn't have this evidence 2-3 years ago because you only had a couple years of data. We didn't know if this was sustainable. We didn't have SAP's numbers. And so it's an encouraging time. But we're still just realizing how big these changes are. So what we've realized is that we artificially look at our workers. We want to connect them socially. We want to connect our supply chain if possible. The Teva pharmaceutical example, a large pharmaceutical company had a mess in their supply chain. They tried like Intuit, a bunch of different solutions, nothing worked. In fact, it's a great thing. Social tools are so powerful that you can usually solve problems you couldn't solve any other way. Just like Intuit had no other way of solving that problem other than to become fundamentally engaged with the market. So Teva created really impressive results in their supply chain using social tools to manage exceptions when things went wrong. And then customers in the world. And what I'm seeing with companies, because I do a lot of case studies, I work with and advise a lot of clients, is that they're primarily focused here and there. A few companies are here, but there are some good examples now. So they have a big project to do their internal employee social network, and have another project or projects more likely in their marketing department. Most global companies, I go, what are you doing for social media? They don't have one social media initiative. They have dozens, or in some case, hundreds. Like we're working with one very large global brand, and they're in 207 countries. And so what do? That's a lot of different regions and languages and other things. So they have over 200 social media initiatives. Each one of them has projects inside of it, right? Because their customers have moved. So, but what happens is then they discover they've done it twice. They've become social twice with different policies, procedures, tools, and guidelines. And so they come together and they realize they start meeting in the two. They have to start connecting the two, and they have to figure out what they have to stop one, and they have to do it over again. And sometimes that's what you got to do. We'll face it. But we know better than that now. We know that's going to happen. I can tell you that right now. That's what's going to happen, right? Some part of your company will use social cast in Yammer, and other salespeople will bring in Chatter with Salesforce. Using Facebook groups, there's a very good chance. When I talk to chief human resource officers, I ask him or her, hey, how many people have asked to create a Facebook group this year? It's never like 1 or 2. It's like 50 or 100. I lost count because that's millions of people have been trained on this collaboration tool. They know how to create Facebook groups, and they know the value of it. So we're surrounded by social. So you have all these little social areas, and we have to design better to say, well, we're going to use some of them, but we don't just need to proliferate them and create more and more of these different silos. Social silos are becoming a problem. And one of the messages I'll give you today is the reason that is important because it's harder to engage at scale if all of your participants are fragmented like that. Scale is the key here, and that means breaking down barriers, right? Just like Angela Arendt at Burberry broke down barriers. She said, look at this mess, and no one can talk to each other because they're all in their own systems and their own environments, and they're not talking to each other. So we have to be careful. We need an integrated vision. We need to think about an ecosystem. It's going to have a few social environments. Not going to ever just have one. It's impossible. You're going to have to decide, am I going to have my own engagement platform, or am I going to use other ones? You're going to have to use other ones. There's no way you can ignore LinkedIn or Facebook, depending on the kind of company you are. But you have to decide, are you going to create live community and own it and control it? Or, the problem is when using someone else's platform, they make the rules, right? And you have to live by them. And we're seeing a lot of companies now afraid of being beholden to these platforms they don't have any control over. Like, what if they shut off access to our customers? What are we going to do? What are they going to charge us to access? Because that's what they're going to do. They have to. Facebook is getting incredible pressure to monetize, right? Incredible pressure. They're going to charge you to access your own customers, unless you have your own engagement platforms, which is expensive. So you're going to have to pay anyway. So is it really a big problem? No. So I'm famous for my big, scary diagrams. This is digital strategy, right? When we talk about digital strategy, we mean web strategy, because that's where everything's going, right? Whether it's TV, music, communication, social, anything, everything's going online, right? So we're seeing that. The end term is not social as a separate thing, right? Right now it is a separate thing because we're not doing it. But all of these things, this is everything you have to do to be digital today. Not every company does all of this, but very few companies have an understanding of how all this is, so they have all these silos. Then you have people come in and go, my God, what a mess we've created, because none of this stuff talks to each other, right? So we have to get better at managing and thinking big picture. So that's what when we talk about strategy, is to start making sense of this. And it's never going to be perfect. You're always going to have challenges. But at the end point, the social is just going to be an integrated and normal part of all of these things, right? Whether this is our web presence or our search engine marketing, our demand generation, our intranets, or whatever it is that we've got. All right, so let's start breaking down how to get there. So how are we doing for time? All right, we have just enough time to do this. So how do we get there? So let's zoom in a little bit more and see if we can break it down step by step. We have a few more, I think, important Kool-Aid slides here, because a lot of people, I think, feel overwhelmed by this, and that's my intent, is to overwhelm you. Because of this. This is some data that came out recently from Deloitte. It's fascinating. The average life expectancy of an S&P 500 company has plummeted dramatically in the last few years. In the 40s, it was 75 years. Now it's 15 years, and it's falling along that curve. It's just like a linear die-off. What's happening? Well, a large part of it is there's this curve you have to ride as a business now, right? So it used to be hard enough to keep up with, all right, telephones used to be a novelty, and copy machines, and radio, and then TV, and then PC, and then internet, mobile phone, and now there's mobile apps and all that stuff, right? That's all the digital stuff you have to do. And you can zoom into any one of these. So if you don't know how to ride that curve, if you're not a technology-centric company, you get merged and acquired by companies who can ride the curve, or you go out of business. That's also happening too. So we're seeing the pace of change in technology is directly driving the pace of change in business. So if there's an imperative to get this all sorted out, you got to sort that out. Or this is the challenge. So if you look at it in aggregate, this is numbers again, these are all big numbers, but the $36 trillion world economy, if you start applying these percentages that we've been seeing in terms of benefits, in terms of reimagining what we're doing. Because as I was talking about earlier, we're seeing a very large change in trust. Because what you're doing now, that $600 billion in spending that you're doing right now, you have some piece of that. The sources that you're spending on are dropping in terms of trust. So your effectiveness is going away. You're still doing advertising, you're still doing direct mail, still doing email campaigns. But if you've been managing those, and I've been looking over the shoulder of those for years, they get less and less effective over time. They still provide value, and you still got to do it. But we know that less and less people read those email campaigns, less and less people open up their junk mail. Those are not trusted sources. People are going to trusted sources. When they want to buy something, they go out there and start trying to engage. And the people who engage with them, well, that's who gets the trust. Often it's their peers, by the way, right? So the message here is that social engagement creates advocates. And the reason why we do that is advocates drive the outcomes we're looking for, right? We can spend a lot less than that $600 billion and get a lot more results. Because the world is social. This is my graph I update all the time that shows from all these different sources. These two lines are really important because that's objective data. That's not survey data. And it shows the rise of social and non-social, right? Email is the one line, the green line. The orange line is social, and in the middle of 2009, for the first time, social networking became the primary form of engagement in the world, and has held that position. It's just over 1 billion people right now. Email is now a legacy technology in decline. It's being used by less people. Social is still on the rise. Now, is that true of our businesses? Absolutely not. Right? We're over here. So these are the ranges of data I've seen over the years. I collect every data point I can find. But this is mostly survey data because we can't look inside of companies and measure how social they are yet. That's coming. So we're 2 to 4 years behind, even though our customers have moved. Right? So that's the message here. Is that social channels, that's why that's the target. Because that's already the dominant form of communication in the world. Has been for years. but we haven't gotten the message. That's the change. So it's social that gives us, it's unleashed this engagement scale as a force that we can tap into. The graph on the top, I bet you can guess what that is, even if you can't read it down there. That's Facebook, right? It is still growing, and my prediction will be 2 billion people here before much longer. So engagement has shifted to new channels. The legacy channels are one to some. They're low scale. They're largely closed to participation. If someone responds to your email campaign or writes back, which probably never happens, to your junk mail that you've mailed to their house, they probably never write you a letter back. But if they did, you wouldn't answer it, right, or rarely. And people know that. They don't even bother. They have low simultaneity. You can't engage with a lot of people at one time. Your company simply can't do it. And they have low visibility, and you can't analyze what happened for the most part. Emails, you can analyze more. Don't get me wrong. But social channels are one to any. There's no known limit. We've seen examples of things like Facebook showing that hundreds of millions of people can simultaneously engage in one place. So we know that they're very high scale. They're open to participation. They're high visibility. And the most amazing thing is because you can see every conversation that happens globally, right? Anytime you want to listen, and I do this example a lot for companies, I'll say, I have this cloud, which I apparently didn't put the slide in this deck, cloud of social networks. You know, it's hundreds of social networks. And these companies almost say, yeah, I don't care about that. That doesn't have anything to do with this. And they're so wrong. So I can usually pull up an example. We can search for conversations happening about that company that are really important to them. They give me a few minutes. I only need a few minutes to show them multiple examples. Because it's possible to analyze these engagement channels. It's exciting. We've done that slide. So, but the burning question, because even though I've said it scales, but does it actually scale? You know, the concern that a lot of businesses have is, yeah, our customers don't use social. Well, I hear that one. And it doesn't scale because they're not there. That's an argument you'll hear a lot. They're like, yeah, this is great data. But we've seen that this is the most authoritative source I could find here, Fishbird and Hedges, 2012% of people from different age groups who have dealt with a brand through social media. It doesn't really taper off. It's not just the millennials, although clearly that's where they are. This is, you know, these are the people who have engaged, but even those 55 and older, over a quarter of them have. And we're at the beginning of this process, right? At the very, very beginning. So these numbers only go up. It is. You can engage because everybody is there. So as the point I've been making here is this, right? And of course, this isn't to scale, right? I can't make this circle small enough. So social engagement is no longer optional, though companies think it is, but they're just basically they're just not communicating. They're losing contact with the marketplace by doing this. The cost to authentically and engage sustainably with tens of millions of potential constituents using existing methods can't be done, cannot be done. So we must use new methods, right? And we're looking inside. We're not looking broadly enough. And it's this one right here is the employees in terms of social customer service, local outreach, referrals and sales, crisis management, the whole gamut of benefits of what we can get. So this is how it looks. If we actually are going to break it down into something that was as understandable as possible, this is my attempt to kind of picture it. So we have these global companies. We often see ones that are multi-location, and that can greatly complicate because if you're a global company, I don't know how many companies you have there, but they have a patchwork of laws. You can very easily break a law by doing something here in the United States and socially and talking about a certain piece of talking to a customer about certain things, unless that conversation is stored in the country of origin. That's EU privacy laws. I was just in Germany yesterday talking about this. They love social media, but talking across country borders, and they all speak, I mean, English is the language of social media, essentially, in Europe. But if that conversation is co-located in the country of origin, you've broken the law, right? So I mean, there are challenges here that we have to be aware of. But the idea is you have an external community, and you're trying to drive outcomes with advocates on customer care, product development, tap into your enthusiasts of your brand. Beta testers, you'd be surprised at how easy you need 10,000 people to kick the tires of your new product or service. You can do it. Pre-sale support, this is huge for SAP, driving hundreds of millions of dollars in outcomes for them. But you have to listen. So one of the things we do is we find that if I go to a large company, I can say, aha, how many different parts of your organization are listening? And they go, oh, we don't know. That's problem number one. And it's almost certainly multiple people across the organization are in a very uncoordinated fashion. So we've seen in companies where a customer will tweet out something, tweeting out the hate thing about this or the love thing about that company, and multiple parts of the company respond to them in an uncoordinated fashion. Right? It's a waste of time, duplicate effort. And what we encourage is that you have a centralized way of doing this that can support for the entire company, listening broadly, doing the analytics, finding the important conversations, and then tapping into and engaging the folks on the ground to getting the right people in the company engaged. There's a great example with Scott Monty. He's head of social media for Ford. And he had this problem where lawyers from Ford had gone to this enthusiast website, and that website was selling merchandise. And the merchandise was using the Ford logo, but it wasn't real, and it had not asked for permission. So they sent out that really scary, you have to shut down your site, or we're going to take everything that you own, the whole thing. So the guy immediately went onto his forums and onto Twitter and explained this. It was an absolutely beloved site. The legal department had no idea who these people were, though. But anybody in Ford branding would know that, hey, you can't treat the people who love us the most in such a terrible fashion. So he saw the tweet, and there's a great example of the exchange. And very quickly, he went and he heard about this, because they had no organized listening back then, found someone in the legal department who would help him right away, and went up the chain and going, if we don't get ahead of this, it's going to be the biggest headache we'll ever have. I need to get this resolved today. So by the end of the day, he had the problem resolved by dispatching it to the right person. It saved them a huge headache, and they were already going postal online already. And he was able to head it all off and go, nope, it's fine. They keep the site up. They do have to remove the merchandise, but they've agreed to do that. They can sell everything else they have that has a legal Ford logo on it, though. So it's interesting. So organizing to engage with the world at scale, that's the message, right? So shifting from email, mass media, and phone down to social networks, customer communities, social supply chain, wherever it is. That's the message we want to send. So how are we going to get there? So I do a lot of work on the back-end pieces that make all this work. So again, you probably noticed one of my scary slides. But the thing that we couldn't do 2 years ago that we can do today is listen to all of those channels. You don't have to be an expert on all of those social networks. But you do need to have a capability where you can listen to all of them and process it fast enough. So there's this huge conversation in the industry called big data. That's what's powering these new listening services. The most exciting industry right now in social business is social analytics, because that's what we need to have, and that's what we don't have. We can't say, oh, there's 2 new social networks out this week, and we got to start listening to them. We don't have the expertise for that. We don't have the resources for that. And more importantly, we need to do this very quickly. So there's 3 big tiers to big data. One is fast. We've had a challenge. We haven't had the technologies to say, I need to listen to 1 billion people in real time, because that's what you have to do. We see that right now customers are forgiving. The data says that they'll wait half an hour after they ask you a question or try and talk to you on social media. They know that it's hard. It's not like when you're calling on the phone and the data is if you put them on hold for more than 30 seconds, you get a different customer when you come back to that conversation. No, in social media, you are much more forgiving, right? But we don't even do that. Most companies are not prepared to listen. So we need to do it very quickly, and there's all these fast data technologies. Then there's the analytics. Once you can listen quickly enough, once you can process the totality of global conversation and find out the parts that matter to you, then you got to analyze its importance. Because a lot of people are just saying, hey, I love ABC company's products. You probably don't have to respond to that. Maybe say thanks, right? Thanks. Retweet it, whatever it is. Most conversations don't require engagement. But if you have a growing volume of conversation, some of those are going to be like the Scott Monty thing. They're going to be important, and you have to know it. You have to see which signals are being amplified and all that. So that requires analytics capability. And then you have to apply it to your business, because you buy tools to do this, you then have to adapt it to your organization's specifics. That's where this deep insight comes from. So that's the challenge. Fortunately, most of this can be purchased now off the shelf and adapted to your organization. We used to see a few companies building their own tools. That's not happening anymore. So 2 years now, we actually have all this. You can listen. There's hundreds of vendors making the tools. You can listen to the totality of conversation. You can filter it down to the important ones, and then you can do everything from report on it, visualize it, or drive your business. So we see these 4 large buckets for how to find your advocates, because you need to do that. Remember the framework we talked about? Find the advocates, then activate them, and then figure out, are you getting results? Social analytics will help you find those very quickly, who those people are. You probably know a lot of them now, right? If you have an advocate, they're hard to ignore. But there's a lot of second-tier ones you don't know about. Social media training and certification. You can make advocates. Employees are usually good advocates. If they're not, you have to wonder, essentially why they're an employee. But you can train them. You can get them online. You can do this for your partners, too. That's a very big help, because you really want to offload this and spread this out as much as possible. If you provide, let's say you do it once a month or once a quarter, and you offer it to not only everyone in your company, but all your business partners and suppliers, that can help. It's going to require a lot of education, though. I will not. Right now, this is still hard to convince in terms of outside the organization. Existing roles in your company that interact with the public, they're usually a lot, and they're usually people you don't expect. There's obviously corp comm, there's obviously marketing, but there's usually others inside your organization, too. And then you can just ask for them. You can say, we're looking for advocates. We want you to get involved. So there are people who have wanted to and just haven't, and that's a great way to tap into them. So we're going to wrap up with the process for getting there. This is actually part of a webcast I do regularly. So the first one is listen. Right? You got the social media world. You got the top tier players. Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Foursquare is probably on that list now. And you've got the social listening. So you have this virtuous cycle, right? And you get your fast data, big analytics, actionable insight, and then you're identifying customer care opportunities. You're getting an understanding of what's going on in the marketplace, so the Toyota brake crisis doesn't happen to you unexpectedly. You're capturing ideas and unmet needs, and you're optimizing your marketing. And it's this cycle here. Then you respond to that. That makes a change, right? You engage your advocates, you enlist them, you activate them, and you take what happens out of that and do it again. And you do this all the time, as often as you can. You got to make it scale, though. That's the challenge. But we currently recommend centralizing the listening and then decentralizing this. Now, sometimes you might have to do this in a couple of different regions if you're a global firm. But we're seeing that it still creates quite a mess. You're still creating a large amount of coordination overhead to do this in multiple places. Then you got a filter. It's about getting to business relevancy. That's one of the hardest things, and this is something only you can do. You can't build, if you build something or you buy something, if you buy a tool, it can do a few generic things for you, but you have to add what's specific to your business. How do I filter what really matters to us? And you're going to get it wrong at first, because you're not going to know everything to filter. You're going to learn. It's going to take you several years to learn all the things you got to look for in that volume of conversation. So we listen, we filter, and after we get to the right conversations, we analyze it, right? We understand not just the needles in the haystack, but the shape of the haystack. And then we marshal our advocates. So this is, I do a column for Information Week. Whenever you see these black and white graphics, they match the book, right? So we have a column on Information Week called Social Business by Design. And so we see this, you have the social world out here, and you do the centralized listening, and then you do triage and dispatch, right? They decide where in the organization that needs to go. They've analyzed for opportunity, right? That might be a marketing opportunity, an innovation opportunity, a crisis, customer care, or understanding that something's going wrong. And they'll usually get involved a global community manager. So community management is one of the core skills of social business. We haven't really had a time to go through that today. But Your global community manager can then add experts. Based on their insight, they can say, oh, this is perfect. This is for our European division. That is a really important marketing opportunity. So I'm going to go and assign somebody, an internal marketing expert, internal subject matter expert, add them to the conversation. They're going to engage back, right? Because you need to get your employees involved. Or someone outside. You might go, hey, you know, that's perfect for somebody we know who's an advocate. Why don't we introduce them and let wonderful things happen, right? But someone has to man that process. That process has to be staffed, and it has to be live and working, right? So there's this process, and it needs to be lightweight, and it can be. We don't see, you know, that 11 average people staffing a social business capability. That's all you really need. SAP, 8 for all 2.1 million of those engaged customers. 8 globally that does this. This is exactly what they do right here. And of course, you have employees doing this by themselves, too. You don't want to discourage that. They're going to be contacted. They're going to be doing their own listening, or they'll be contacted, and then they'll engage. You kind of want to know what's going on. You'll probably hear it. Your listening will probably identify it. But this is independent advocacy. You want it to happen. You don't want to centralize everything too much. But this is what it looks like. Marshaling your advocates and getting them involved and engaging. Right? It's the worst thing is missing those opportunities. All those people out there want to engage with you, and they're going to create value. Almost all of those conversations will create value for you. And it's almost a crime not to do anything about it. Along the way, you have to get your organization ready. You probably recognize this is one of my diagrams. And we see there's some things you have to be doing to prepare the groundwork. Education, of course, is a big one. Driving culture change, because you're going to come back from this session and saying all these crazy things, right? And they're not going to have the context to understand you. And go, yeah, maybe next year. So you need executive leadership. The most powerful thing you can do is get one well-respected executive in your company to back you and go, oh, no, they know what they're talking about. Let's listen to them. Let's let them show what they can do. And then they have to also create interference for you to make mistakes, because you will. This is all so new. We don't know enough. Define strategic goals. Like if your customer care is your biggest thing, focus on that. Or if you need to drive sales and marketing, your business desperately needs to increase its business, that's where you should focus. In fact, you're going to have a lot more support from executives if you're trying to solve big problems. A thing I recommend is talk to whoever your sponsor is. Like, what's our biggest problem as a company? Or what's the 5 things we need to do this year that are our priorities? And see if you can align with that. If your strategic goals align with the company's strategic goals, magic will happen. You got to redesign your business processes to be social, and you got to manage risk. Social is public. Everyone can see it. You know, if a customer contacts you for a service and you suddenly start talking about their account number or other information, it's very easy to say something that you would think is completely innocent, but is actually revealing private information. There are now ways of dealing with that. There are services like LiveOffice, Socialware, and others that will give you a safety net. They'll automatically block things that sound suspicious to make sure, hey, I think you might have done something that might not be legal. Because it's much easier for a company to do something illegal. It's harder for customers to do something illegal in social media. So I never call it risk management, though. If you come in with any plan and you have a slide that says risk management, that's all anyone will talk about after that. Call it something else. And then you do it to the different parts of your organization. All of these things have to apply across the different functions that you have. You need social business intelligence. That's analytics and big data. You need a set of social tools. You need to iterate quickly, refine, and disrupt your own processes before the market does it for you. And you're going to get the outcomes you planned for, the intentional outcomes, and many outcomes you didn't plan for, because social media goes in its own direction. Your customers have their own plans and their own agendas and their own desires, and they're going to want to come in and take your company where you never expected. That's what you want many times. And when it's not what you want, you figure out how to shape it and direct it to where you do want to go. After all, these are your advocates. So you need to transform them. So all these things are great: listening, filtering, analyzing, and mobilizing. But you also got to change your company along the way. And then start getting processes that scale. This is the kind of view of how this works. You acquire a customer through advocacy. then you do business with them, then you support them, or your customers support them. They become advocates, and they get you new customers, and that whole virtuous cycle starts here, the social marketing halo. That's just the natural outcome of social business, but by tapping into all the people that can help you. Close the loop. This is the part it's harder to do than it sounds. Easy to do the listening. I don't know how many companies do this with business intelligence. They generate all these reports and numbers, and you know what people do? They don't really read those reports and numbers. Most business intelligence is greatly underutilized to drive the business. And the same thing, by the way, is true of social business. You're like, hey, there's too much out there. We often do not close the loop, which is we have to. It's the response part. Actually getting back to and talking back to the world, because it also seems to be a little scary too. And then there's a competitive aspect, because you're not the only ones going to do this. And we've noticed this pattern, and we tried to make the point in the book as well, that once a leader in your industry does it, I was talking a couple weeks ago in Las Vegas to the head of community for EMC, and it's the largest customer community around storage products. Sounds boring to us, but they really care about it. And what is it that their competitors are having a hard time creating their own communities, because there is already one that talks about that. And EMC doesn't care if you talk about their products or their competitors' products. They own that. They're like the Amazon with the reviews. They own that world of conversation. And so the other people in the industry are trying to get into it and create their own communities. They're 10 times smaller. When people want to go and talk about storage, they go to that community, even if they don't even own EMC products. Guess long-term who has a better chance of doing business with them. So wield it competitively. If you're in your industry, now it might just be in your local region. You know, you might be a local business, or you might be a global business. Either way, by owning and establishing those relationships, being the leader, creating your network effect, and locking in those relationships, that's going to be important, because if you come too late to the party, there will not be a party at your business, right? That social party won't be there. So, another one of my diagrams. This shows everything, the operations of a social business, right? So, all the stuff we've covered here pretty much, this top part here, business activity and conversation, your structured business processes, all your ad hoc business processes, your workers engaging across them, listening, and you taking your strategic trends and your tactical situations and you're feeding it into your marketing, your CRM, your product development, and your supply chain, right? And it goes like this virtuous engagement cycle we've been talking about. You have community management to support it. You have that transformation process to support it. If you're a larger company, policy is really important, and it has to be communicated. And then you've got all the design process, your strategy, which you've documented, all the organizational changes, staffing and education that you have to do, the redesign of your business processes, the infrastructure and tools you need to create, and then you need to govern and manage it all. And you need executive leadership and oversight. It's like Angela Ahrendts. She had such a high impact at Burberry because she's a CEO. She's like, we're going to do this. We've got to do this. She created the imperative, and by golly, that did make it happen much, much faster. You need your legal team, by the way, and that's going to be a tough conversation because, by the way, their default stance is not to expose the company to liability. So the answer to almost any question is no. And this is a really scary world for them, right? So don't engage too early with them, but you do have to engage. I advise the last responsible moment, and then educate and educate and educate. Then tell them what you're going to do. Although that works for a lot of these things. HR, oversight, and partnership is really important. You get your IT department on board and your security and compliance processes. So it's kind of like the whole big vision, how to engage at scale, and all of the things. If you did all this, this is more, this will be much messier than it looks like on this chart. And you won't be able to do it all, and you'll have to go back and fix things. But just to give you a big picture of how to engage at scale, so a checklist, if you will. Have we done all of this at some level, even if we're not perfect or great at it, or if we don't even have people to do it? We're doing it part-time, not nights and weekends. That might be the case as well. So that's kind of the big picture. There's more to it. I don't want to make this sound scary. A lot of this stuff can be done so much more easily than it could have been done a few years ago. We can engage at scale now, no matter what size company that we are. We know where to aim it. We know what some of the mistakes are. We know what doesn't work, because we've seen a lot of people tried a lot of different things. Starting communities of your own is hard work, and it will not work every time. You might have to try a few times till you find the right formulation and the right people. But it requires advocates inside and outside to do it. Often going to the customer, going to engagement platforms that are big, and drawing them in. It's one of the strategies, I call it the escape pod strategy, is go out to Facebook, go out to Twitter, and use that to draw people in scale into your own communities, and then you can create them. Because long term, that's what you want to do. We don't know where all this is going to go. We know that as social networks become more commercial and become public companies, they're not necessarily our friends in the same way, right? And they need to put their hands in our pockets. So if you have to pay for it anyway, you might as well start investing in it yourself. That's my default recommendation is to do that, but you're going to start by going out there. So I hope you found that this was useful. I have copies of my book over there. They're complimentary for those who attend this talk. If you need an extra copy, please only take an extra one. If you need one for your boss, please take an extra one. But it'll help you explain it. It is designed for executive management to understand the imperative for doing this and then how to get there. So let's take a few questions or discuss this or talk about your challenges or problems. I want to make sure you're getting the most out of this. Any questions while I get a drink of water? Yes.
Really awesome. Fabulous. Really great.
Thank you.
Peter yesterday spoke about social business and really simplified it just down to communication. This seems much more detailed and intricate. I know that the two of you collaborated together
Yes.
on the whole, the birth of social business.
Yes.
What is the defining point of difference between what he's saying and what you're saying?
Well, so I try, a lot of it is in our styles, because Pete and I wrote the book together, and this is all essentially the same way that we all looked at this and sat down for months working through all these ideas and what we've learned so far. Pete likes to simplify, and I like to think that we're at a place where we need to have enough details to go and make this operational. So our styles are actually highly complementary. His is good to get started, and then when you know the moving parts, I think mine is useful. But yes, the principle number one of social business is anyone can participate. It is about communication. That's exactly right. In any given process you have, whether it's team, departmental, division-wide, company-wide, worldwide, the key to making that process social in the work is to make anyone able to participate in it and to invite them to engage with you. So it is about communication. So I like to think we're on the same page.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. That's kind of the how, right? We just want to, yeah. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
So the problem that we've had in our organization is getting people to see that they need to respond to events that happen in social media in internet speed as opposed to standard slow business speed.
So what windows are we talking about? They want to take days or?
They want to take weeks.
Weeks, okay.
And
Wow.
we've had 2 failures of communication that took weeks and blew up. And just we're having problems saying, hey, this has to be addressed like now. And it's understanding globally what legal can say and what we can't say and things like that.
Was it legal review that drove it into taking weeks or?
Legal review and just escalation up to say, hey, this is our priority. It's still not seen as a channel that legitimate questions are leading, that events can sort of be a leading way to a problem.
Yeah, so perhaps you can do an internal case study or even an external one saying, here's what we've learned, and perhaps do a little bit of data digging to see what there's probably other situations like that you've missed as well. But unfortunately, it comes down to making a business case. You say, here's the changes what we can do. Here's what this is likely to cost if we don't do it. Here's the benefits if we do it. And use some of the data that's now available about what the returns are, and then you have to close the loop and explain what should have been done and what the benefits would have been. but this is in like a case study format, saying, hey, I just wanted to close the loop on this so we could make sure we know what we learned about this, and then sneak your business case in there, as what I would recommend. But good luck with that. Yes.
I think you said in your presentation, engagement is creating advocacy. One of the things that seems to be throughout the conference is that that's been a theme, but how do you scale engagement? What do you see the trends there, and how are companies?
Yeah. So you have to systematically get more people involved. Is that we are the curators or the orchestrators of our businesses, right? So. And we talked about this some, which is one, going well beyond your social media team and getting as many people inside your company engaged in talking to the advocates and creating advocates with your partners. That's one of the best sources too, we talked about. And then reaching out to your customers in a systematic way too. So it means being proactive. Even a call to action can make a big difference. Saying we are, creating an advocacy program. We may not call that. Like SAP has these champions. I forget the exact term. It's something champions, right? These people that they know are great advocates, and they recognize them. They write articles about them and do videos about them and put it on YouTube. And these people feel loved because they are loved, right? So those are all ways of doing that. I've written a lot online about that. If you want more details. Yes. Yeah, so how do you really show ROI? And the easiest way to do it is find out what KPIs are already being tracked, because they're the ones that have respect in your organization. KPIs, key performance indicators. And then talk somebody into a pilot, volunteer. If you're a small enough company, you can probably volunteer. Even if you're big, like at the CIA, we worked with them on Intellipedia, and they did it all on volunteer labor and proved that they would get engagement and the people would share information even in a classified environment, and they would do it without violating information sharing laws. And then they were able to get a little bit of data showing about how people are spending more time getting work done, right? Because they track in very detailed ways how long different processes take. You have to keep work logs. So that number was being tracked. So find your existing KPIs and find some way to have impact on them, even if you have to do something guerrilla style. But usually you can get enough to do. If you can promise a 5 or 10% in performance improvement on an important KPI, there's a good chance they're willing to let you try. I give you a little bit of money to try. So find out existing measures, figure out how to make these ideas improve them. They will, absolutely. There is a very good chance, no matter what it is, that you can drive improvements. Social media is a very powerful amplifying technology because you can engage with so many more people and then fix those KPIs. So I believe we're out of time, right? Okay. Please make sure you grab a copy of the book on your way out. I'll be around. Is this room being used right after this? Okay. And my plane doesn't leave for a little while yet, so I'm happy to stick around and have some more conversations. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.